What is going on, guys? Ricky in the Flip Lab. Today I'm here with Rich Wonders.
What's up, man?
What's going on?
Man.
So Rich is local here out of Phoenix, and he mostly specializes in novations.
That's right.
So as a guy who's mostly, me, wholesale, flipping, just starting to pitch creative deals as far as like seller financing and sub twos. Novations is something we've been looking into as well with the shift in the market happening right now. Obviously, like wholesale's been pretty tough with the margins getting kind of thin. So I'm excited to talk to you about this creative solution that solves a lot of sellers' problems, it sounds like, with novations.
I love it, man. I love it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation too, because I know you wholesale on a high level, you flip, you've got a lot going on. So I think we'll have some interesting back and forth here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So to kind of start it off, I want to know if you're a seller, let's put ourselves in the seller's shoes.
Yeah.
Why would a seller decide to go with the novation over listing a property?
Sure. So a few things. The sellers that we're talking to are your typical wholesale sellers for the most part.
Distressed, motivated still. There has to be a problem or something there.
So that's kind of a prerequisite for this to work, is there has to be some sort of underlying factors. Like, it's very hard to flip a retail or non-distressed seller into this. So, from doing PPC marketing, there's a lot of properties that are in either decent shape or really good shape where there's some underlying motivation, but like to sell to fix and flipper or like a landlord normally isn't going to make sense right now. So basically, like, the main thing we offer is like a hands-off experience. And the main reason that they'll pick it is, we're giving them a really low cash offer. And then this is a more attractive option where we can beat out the other wholesalers, still have a good margin, and still give them basically the experience they're looking for, where they're not having, it's much different. Like when you're working with us on the concierge service, even if you hire a realtor, there's a lot of legwork that goes into it. There's a lot of communication, there's paperwork, there's decisions being made. Like, it's that whole process. We handle all that for them. So we can give them like a higher price, but they'll get a different experience. Like, our goal is to like serve them on a very high level. So one, they're happy. And two, that's what they're looking for. Like, they have problems to be solved. We do a bunch of stuff behind the scenes that they would have very difficult time doing it themselves.
Yeah. And just to break it down a little bit, what's the difference between a novation type deal and, let's just say, a traditional listing?
Okay. So on a novation, the sellers promised a net price. So they get the net price. We hire the realtors. We pay the commissions. If there's any repairs that have to be done to pass inspection, we handle that as well, like as long as the deal still works. And basically, the only communication they have is through us. So we like keep them, involved as much as they need to be, but they're out of the weeds as far as like the whole experience, like the day-to-day thing of the communication and all that. We're handling all that.
Okay. So maybe an example of a lead that I got yesterday.
Okay.
PPC lead, or SEO, was one of those. And it came in. It was a $900,000 house in New Jersey.
Okay.
Kind of grandma house. She'd been living there a while, but in pretty good shape. Sellers are motivated to sell because the mom is like the family's deathly scared of COVID still.
Wow.
Whatever, that's their thing, right?
Sure.
She's like, I don't want anyone in the house with COVID. It's crazy out there, right? Don't want anyone looking at these houses. Okay, fine. So that's why she doesn't want to list it, because I was asking her, she says she wants Zestimate price right off the bat.
Of course.
This is a $900,000 home. So that's a risky house. Like, we got to buy that thing, at 60%.
Right.
So I'm in like the sixes. To her, that's completely out the window. Obviously, She wants to protect her mom, but over $300,000, probably run the risk at that point, or
sure.
Do something else. So with her, now she's also talking to realtors. Right. She doesn't want to list it that way. But at the same time, like, if it's $600K cash, or in her mind, like, list the property, she would probably end up listing it. Maybe list it at a more competitive price. Maybe just do like a 1-day showing or something to maybe avoid all that like foot traffic. Right. But where would you kind of pivot that conversation with her yesterday, where I kind of shut it down and I said, hey, probably should just list it and maybe just do like a 1-day showing, get a bunch of people in, list it at a competitive price. How would you convert that conversation maybe into a novation, or maybe is that not a good fit?
So basically it comes down to being able to price negotiate it lower, right? Because for a novation, you can think like as a general rule, your exit price is going to be about 80% of as is retail. So what other similar properties are selling for, you're going to end up netting 80% of that, because you're going to want to do about a 10% price reduction for it to sell fast. And then you can expect roughly 10% to come out for realtor fees, commissions. If there's any fix up that needs to be done for inspection, it's normally more like 6 to 8%, but I like to tell people to estimate 10% just to leave a little wiggle room, right?
Yeah, I mean, even on a retail sale, right? They usually net about 90%, let's say, of the net proceeds.
Correct.
So in a novation, we're looking more like that all-in net proceeds to the sellers, generally landing around 80%.
So that's the net proceeds to us.
To you, okay.
So then you have to also negotiate your profit in there for it to make sense. So I would say with that one, see, the way I pitch novation is I don't pitch it as like an option. Like I go through the whole call like a cash offer. There's no mention of novation. There might be some subtle little seeds planted that we have a few creative options, but I don't go through and explain it like you see, like, you know, I've seen some people pitch it that way, right? There's nothing wrong with that. On the easy ones, you can get them that way. But if you go through it as a cash offer, it gives you a lot more negotiation pull where to get their price down. So that would be one where, like, you know, I'm hitting them with low comps, I'm going over repairs, I'm showing them, you know, what the process will look like if they go that route. And then I would try my best to get them to come down off their price. And then I would come back, give them a cash offer that was kind of half-hearted. And then I hit them with the concierge service and explain how they qualified for that and run them through that and try to run through and close like with the paperwork there.
Okay. So this situation, they're thinking in their head, retail, get 900, 600 cash just sounds way too low to them.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe now all of a sudden, if you're solving their problem by kind of hands off, not a lot of people walking through the house, you don't have to do anything, like they're getting all those same perks of that cash offer essentially in their mind. But maybe if she only needs to be, maybe she would accept something at like 750 or 800. Now that's starting to at least,
sure,
you know, have her think like, well, obviously it's going to be less than retail because I'm looking for a convenient way of selling. Like she understands that method, but she's not in a position willing to give away
$300K.
Yeah, $300K.
Yeah, 40% roughly, right?
Right.
So like on a deal like that too, you know, if there was enough margin in there and I was certain that like the house would sell fairly quickly at a good price and there was enough room, I might even get creative and try to put them up in a hotel or a Airbnb or something like that. Like we've had it too where we start moving their stuff out so that it'll show better. And it also kind of like mentally gets them, because a lot of times the sellers, they have this resistance to selling the house, right? Like to like moving their stuff, like they know they need to.
Procrastination. And
they procrastinate. And sometimes there's like this attachment to it where they'll just like drag their feet. Yeah. And sometimes if you can kind of kickstart that process, they'll get on board. But you're right, that is kind of a tricky one because it is at that higher price point. But then again, in New Jersey, that's not as abnormal as a $900,000 house in, say, like Oklahoma.
Right. Yeah, it's still like, you know, higher price point overall. And have you found any correlations between, do novations generally work with higher price stuff, super low price stuff? Have you seen any correlations there? So kind of they work in both areas. The thing that we're looking for is activity at that price point and at that, you know, type of house, like the condition wise, right? Like the more activity that we see, like sales on the MLS, listings, things moving quick, that's a good sign. Like the scarier ones are ones that there's not a lot of like evidence on how quickly it will sell. Like there's just not a lot of data. But even the ones in like the smaller markets, we found, because a lot of times those are at lower price points. So we'll have a bigger pool of buyers because we can get the FHA first time home buyers. We can get just like the working class people. So it's kind of on a case by case basis and at the right price. Like the key is with this too,
this is not like a silver bullet to like stop negotiating and now you can just sell everything like it's the hedge fund days, sell it for like 100% and get it for 90%. Like you still want to negotiate these low because you want to list them at a lower price so that it moves faster than a typical listing would.
Right, because if not, essentially, like I was wondering, days on market now heading more into like a buyer's market we're in, depending obviously nationwide, it's a little different, but days on market, I think nationwide everywhere has gone up over the last 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Has that had a pretty big impact on selling those novations? Because I figure when they come in, they're looking for that quick cash solution. It's not quite that. So with days on market going up, has that impacted how sellers are responding to novations?
So the way that is positioned, like the MLS is not a major selling point, like that we pitch as like a benefit to like convert them. The way we convert them is we basically explain like with our expertise and our network and our resources, we have ways of getting this sold to a third-party buyer. We leave it somewhat open because some of these we will sell off market, some of them we will sell to a realtor with a pocket listing, and some of them make it all the way to the MLS. So we're just pushing the certainty of it. Now, yes, there was a couple months like when all the rates started going up. Yeah, like we had buyers that fell out. Like, yeah, I had a couple bad months. Like, I won't lie. Like, we had deals that fell apart. We had ones where they started renegotiating and then it didn't work. So I've noticed, though, in the last like probably like 2 months, things really have picked up where like we had a deal it's in North Phoenix right now, or I think it's Peoria. And it's a bigger house, like a 3,000 square foot house. And we got an offer in like 3 weeks. And it's a full price offer.
Wow. Okay.
And it's like a nicer house. It's at, what price point is that? I think we sold it for like $450 and we're in it for like $390. So, it's a nice little banger after, the fees and commissions and everything.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that was probably one seller wanted probably pretty close to retail, right? In their head, they might be thinking $450 or something, but you probably, we're looking more around like 400. You probably negotiated down to 390, and that was kind of, they were like, all right, if you get me 390, I'm good to go. Was that kind of how it went?
So this particular one was actually sent to me on Instagram, and they had it under contract as a wholesale deal, and they had it at 390 as a wholesale deal. They had a buyer. The buyer flaked out at the last minute. Might have been another wholesaler. Might have just changed their mind. And then we converted this one to Novation at the same price. So this one, I mean, it was honestly a pretty easy conversion. Like they wanted to sell. We just had to basically make them understand, okay, because they were under the impression like the last wholesaler was the final buyer. This was a done deal, and then things fell apart. So I had to address that. Like the funding fell out. Luckily we have this other solution. They brought me on basically because they know we can make deals work that normally don't work. And we just kind of like earn their trust and explain the process. And now they're on board and like they are thrilled too, because like honestly, as a wholesale deal, it would have never worked at 390. Like, you know what I mean? They would have taken to get that same experience of the hands off, they would take a major haircut. I think like the offer that came in for it was like 350 was what the cash buyers were saying. So they would have had to be like way below that.
Yeah, makes sense. And that's where a lot of those wholesale spreads are disappearing right now, with buyers have lowered their pricing, sellers haven't like lowered their pricing that much because they're not as in tune with the market. Right. So it seems like there's definitely spreads there. I always wonder, now when it comes to like dealing with these sellers, a lot of the times when I'm just going for wholesale, it's the people who are super motivated and they're just like, dude, I'm not listing it. Like I need cash right now. And those are the ones we're buying at 40, 50 cents on the dollar. Nice. Right. And then there's those ones where they're considering wholesale, right? But they also kind of want a higher price and they're considering listing it with a realtor. Like they're talking to realtors. How do you like overcome that objection when you're dealing with sellers who are also talking to realtors and thinking about listing it?
So the whole 90% of the conversation is from a wholesale type of frame of like a cash buyer, right? So while I'm negotiating, they're not making the comparison of what we're doing compared to like a realtor, right? They're looking at it as like a cash buyer thing. So when they're flipped and converted, it's basically they're seeing they're getting the best of both worlds. And we earn their trust through the conversation because like the process itself is very low friction. Everything's positioned with, like a third party, kind of classic sales of the underwriting team. We don't push super hard on them. Like we'll name the low comps, but it's very like non-confrontational, like the sales style, right? So you don't get into that same back and forth where like the rapport and the trust is somewhat damaged, right? Like we try to like have goodwill from them throughout the whole process.
You're not coming across just like, dude, I'm trying to buy this house as cheap as possible. You're not really coming across that way.
It's very non-combative. Okay. And like, even when it's myself on the phone, like I always position myself as a low man on the totem pole. And that helps me align myself with them and make it so they're not going to argue with me. And, they feel like we're on the same team, which we are ultimately. Like my job is to bring them to reality because what they're asking for, they're not going to get from us and they're not going to get from anybody. And what's going to have, like I always look at it as like, look, if I can't bring them over to reality, they're either going to have someone that overpromises and can't deliver, or someone they're just going to get frustrated and someone's going to whack them over the head with a wholesale. And then they're going to like have to give the thing away or keep going through the process. So like, yeah, like the process is very low friction. And then like we hit them with everything at the end. And then it's just kind of like the perfect solution of what they're looking for, where they still see it as easy, but now they can get a higher price than my low cash offer. Yeah.
And that makes sense. Obviously, like they're probably talking to if you're dealing with mostly PPC, you said?
PPC and cold call.
Okay.
We get some cold call leads.
So those type of sellers that are entertaining those people and offers, they're usually talking to a bunch of other people who are mostly wholesaling. All those wholesale prices are coming in super low. They're probably already kind of running out of hope that this might be, an option for them. And then you're coming in last minute offering maybe 40, 50K more. And now that's sounding pretty appealing to them.
Absolutely. And it's like, because they're still getting the experience that they want of someone else handling everything. That's kind of like the big thing where they see, compared to a realtor, they're opening up this can of worms of all these new things they're going to have to do. They're going to have to meet with a realtor. They probably already met with some. Obviously, they didn't really like or trust them that much because they didn't close the deal, right? They didn't get the listing.
Yeah.
So they're having these reservations for a reason. So like earning their trust, in terms of they trust that we're competent and can get the deal done is super important. Like that's what carries it to the finish line is them they want certainty. Like most of them, like that's the main thing. Like I've had sellers tell me over and over, like, hey, look, I had someone that offered me more money, but there was something that just kind of seemed off about them, or, they seemed like they weren't really confident or whatever. And they're like, I just kind of blew them off and told them I'd call them back. And, yeah, I don't know. I'm like losing my trail.
Do you, when you're like qualifying these sellers, I know when I'm doing it for wholesaling, I'm asking them, why don't they list it with a realtor? Because I want to know, like, why, considering the majority of people, I do think their best option if they want to sell their home, clean it out, take some nice photos, maybe make a couple small repairs here and there, and then list it on the market to get your highest offer. Like, I guess, are you, how are you handling those conversations?
So I will suggest that to them, but when I do it, it's at a very specific time and in a very specific way. So it'll be after naming like a low comp that's a low MLS comp, right? Like
okay.
the biggest beater on the block, right? Yeah. Naming the comp, and then I'll back out the realtor fees and commissions. Like, hey, your neighbor got this one. I'll explain all the things that are similar first. Then I'll hit them with the address, and then I'll back out the commissions, fees, and the days on market. And they'll say, hey, if you did want to go the retail route, you can expect to walk away with X amount, and it's already like a real low amount. And then I'll just like kind of go through the process and ask them that way, where like I try to only ask them the question when I know I'm going to get the answer that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So when I do ask them that, I will, but I'll build it up really big first, because sometimes if I ask them that too soon in the conversation, like they will say, oh yeah, I am considering it. You know what I mean? Because they're also trying to play the game that they have options.
Yeah, they
too.
have options. Sure.
Yeah. So I'll hit them with that, but it'll be like after we've gone through all the other stuff, just to kind of like nail that door shut. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is that a big thing that comes up, like obviously most leads we talk to don't turn into deals at all, right? It's a pretty just wholesaling, whatever it is. It's like overall, whether you're a realtor, it's a low conversion type of game. Do you deal with a lot of people kind of at the end who say that, you know what, I'll just list it instead of doing this? Like, does that come up a lot at the end?
It will. Like for the ones that we don't convert, that's typically the route that they're going to go. Because if they're going to go the wholesale route, normally those ones will end up flipping and converting a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then we'll have some where like maybe someone's just promising them way more. They'll end up going with them, and then we'll circle back around and we'll get them like after they can't perform. And a lot of times it'll be like at a lower price than what we initially offered them. Because they've already kind of been through the ringer, you know what I mean? And they're ready just for the solution. But yeah, that will come up because for a lot of people too, you know what I mean? If they don't mind waiting and the experience like isn't that big of a deal and their price expectations like full retail, like those ones, like if we can't make at least 30K on a deal or at least think that we are going into it, like we won't take it on because it is more work. Like you're hiring a realtor, you know what I mean? It's not like we're just email blasting it out.
Yeah.
Like there are more steps and we want to make sure there's enough margin. We're not doing all this, spending all this time and we're making like 5-10K because a couple things went wrong and we didn't make as much as we thought we would. Because those deals will like, it's bad for morale. It's a bad use of time, the opportunity costs. There's enough deals out there where you can make 30K. Like if you have that expectation to go after the little ones, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. And I know like a big part, like you're saying, convenience is a big reason why they decide to pick you. Now, not every realtor is the best realtor out there, but what I think is if you're a good realtor, you should be giving them convenience. Like the seller shouldn't really have to be worrying about too much. Like, you know, like the realtor should be handling 90% of the stuff. Like where do you feel like you guys offer even more convenience or it's a better offer compared to a good realtor that should be able to list at a competitive price, get a few people in, get some offers, deal with that, where the sellers don't have to worry about too much?
So this is a great point you're bringing up because that's a big part of how we're able to be successful with this is we leverage and we have a way to find the best realtors in the area. Like after we get a property under contract, we'll call all the realtors that have pendings and recent sales within like a mile, and we'll interview them. And we have like a very specific process on how to go through, what questions to ask what price they think we'd need to be at to sell within 30 days. So we're hand selecting and interviewing the best realtors because like that's like an important piece of the puzzle. Like you don't want just anybody selling your property. You're going to pay the same commission no matter what. Like I always pay 6%, 3 on each side.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to pay full price to get quality, right? So like we're selecting a much better realtor. They're probably going to pick like their neighbor or like the lady they go to church with or
you know cousin. What I mean?
Yeah. Whoever they're buddies with. We're making sure we're getting the best realtor. We're making decisions behind the scenes too that we're optimizing the process for them because otherwise they're just going to go into it even though they are listing with an agent, they're not going to do it the same way that we are. Yeah,
and even I mean I've dealt with it so many times where it's on market, you're talking to the realtor isn't very in tune with the market and doing deals, and you obviously know it's overpriced and it's not going to move. And you feel bad for that seller because a lot of the times that seller doesn't know.
Right.
They don't know that it's like, yeah, at that price, of course it's not going to sell. So it sounds like you're also dealing with people where you're like, yo, I'm in charge here. Like if we have to list it at this price, that's what we're going to do to get it sold fast. Or if we need to make up, and I want to bring up repairs because I've always been a little bit concerned. I've heard some people just do novations, no repairs at all, pretty much.
That's me.
And that's where I get a little bit though, like, isn't that just listing the property?
Yeah.
If you're not doing any repairs. And then I'm just always like, even a wholesale deal, if I buy it at 40 cents on the dollar, typically it's still like the seller's best solution given their circumstance.
Right.
Like they've just put themselves in a really, really bad position where it's either like they have to pick the best of the worst options.
Right.
Sell at 40 cents on the dollar or get foreclosed on.
Right.
Like walk away with nothing or walk away with at least a little something. But I feel like a lot of the times, do you feel like a novation is actually a better solution for these sellers compared to, just listing it on the market?
So it's like pretty much every business under the sun is either arbitraging a physical product or arbitraging information, right?
Yeah, service or yeah, sure.
Right, for the most part, right? So the value that we're adding is like, so for us, like knowing how to, it's the same question of like, why doesn't a seller just go and log on to Facebook groups, post their house as a deal and sell directly to the cash buyer? Like to us, like it seems like an easy thing, right?
Yeah.
But to them, they have no clue. And like if we look back, like we had to go through a bunch of rabbit holes to like figure out how to do all this stuff. So the thing that we're providing and the thing that like lets me know like we're giving them real value is like the peace of mind to them is super crucial. And because of our expertise, because we know how to hire the right realtor, we know how to negotiate. Like we know, even with the right realtor, we know how to position ourselves as people of high value where we have their full attention. Because every realtor too, keep in mind, like they've got multiple properties, they prioritize things accordingly. And like if these sellers, they don't, you know, with the realtors, it is a sales process as well of like
100%.
Having them come with their A game, you know, so we know how to position all that where we can basically just give them the hands-off experience and they're getting the net price that they want and they're not having to deal with all this stuff. Because like, honestly, if they try to do all this their own, they probably would end up walking away with less or it'd be sitting on the market because the realtor would just tell them
unrealistic expectations
what
that a lot
they
of
wanted
realtors
to hear.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they're not going to get the result. Like the thing that makes me sleep good at night is I know like if they agree to my price, like we will get the deal done and I will do anything above and beyond, whether it's putting them up in a hotel, whether it's helping them move their stuff, like all the things that all the speed bumps come through. That's why we call it the concierge service. Like we're addressing everything. And I really, really try to give them a high level of service so that they're happy because like, you don't want your sellers going sideways or deciding they don't like you, deciding they don't want to work with you. The deal's done. Like when that happens.
Yeah. Even on like a wholesale deal we did recently, we helped a guy find a storage unit and kind of put him in contact with people that just help him get out, let him stay in the house like an extra week, like really try to, hey, if you're going to sell kind of at a discount, you do deserve that like over the top convenience and really not have to deal with it, which obviously, and in my personal opinion, I don't think the majority of realtors actually do that for their client. And they're not very good at having those hard conversations as well of understanding like, you know, the seller's in the situation where they might need to sell in 60 days or like they really got to get this thing moving. And I know they want this price, but you haven't had that hard conversation with them of look, it's not going to move at that price in your time frame, but they just want that listing so bad. They just want to get that listing agreement signed.
For sure.
That sometimes that causes a bunch of, you know, down the road, the house not selling, sellers being frustrated with their experience with their realtor, just due to conversations not happening up front.
Right. And it's hard. Like you're dealing with people's biggest asset. You know, in realtor school, they teach you the law, but they don't, you know what I mean? They don't teach you how to deal with
negotiation
this type of stuff
or how to convey information.
Right. So it's a difficult task with a lot of moving parts. So yeah, absolutely. Like with the sellers, anything we can do to make it easier for them, we always do that to make sure that we can justify our fee. But yeah, with the realtors too, you know, working with good realtors makes a huge difference. Like we used to do flat fee listings.
Yeah, I've heard other Novation guys do flat fee listings.
If people have the time to take all those calls and everything, bless their heart. But like, if you have more than one or two of them, flat fee broker is hell dealing with. Like, first off, they normally when they call in off the listing, they're either getting a VA or a recording. Yeah. Like you can't put your own phone number on there. So right there, that's like an instant point of friction and an instant weird thing. Like when they call and it's like someone with an accent, it's not a realtor, then they're calling you. It just raises all these questions. And like, to me, there's so many pros of having a great local agent that to do it any other way to me just seems like foolish. And like at scale, it's not going to work. Like no matter how good you are at dispo, if you've got 20 properties, I mean, you're going to have much easier time finding the 20 best realtors in those markets than hiring and training like freaking like 5, 10, 20 people to do the same work that these people would do.
Yeah. And I guess like what percentage of your novations, obviously let's maybe take out when all deals were canceling there in like the middle of the summertime, right? Not just novations, but wholesale deals were canceling, retail deals were canceling, right? It was kind of a mess. But in general, Like, let's say if in like the wholesale industry, we're looking at maybe like 60% of deals that get contracted end up closing. Like, what is it for novations, or the way you're running your novations?
I would say it's pretty close. Between 70 and 80% will make it to the finish line. Yeah.
And typical timeline from when you contract with the seller to when they're at the closing table collecting, their proceeds.
Yeah.
How long would you say on average these novations take?
60 days.
Okay.
So 60 days. Yeah. So you look at it like the goal is always to get it under contract and get an offer before the 30-day mark. So, because once you get your offer, if it's like with a loan, financing, you're looking at 30 days to close it. And if you're not getting an offer within 30 days, it's a pricing issue anyways. And like more time is not going to make that better, like especially in this market, right? So I'm very careful. Like I see some people that write it out for like 90 days, 120 days. And it's like, you just need to negotiate harder on the front end, because like there shouldn't be anything you're doing that takes 90 or 120
Well, I feel
days.
like then to my point, it's like if you have all that time and you just want to try to get a ridiculous high price, you probably like novation's probably not your solution there. You probably should just like throw it on Zillow, FSBO, and just field offers for 6 months.
You're now the crappy realtor we were talking about that just gives them whatever they want and just throws it on there and hopes for the best. So yeah, when you have that standard of like, look, if we can't reasonably make 30K on this, we're priced too high and we won't take it on. Once you draw that hard line, then it's much easier to negotiate like that, because like your back's against the wall if it's anything above 30, rather than like, oh, well, this is when you start getting a lot of deals that fall through. I'm pretty sure we can make 20 on it. Let's lock it up. We'll get an agent to list it. You call the good agents. They think you have it priced too high. You call some of the mediocre ones. They're like, yeah, we'll take it on. I think you can. Like, we have this comp. They're looking at all the optimistic comps. Like, yeah, we can make this work. And that's when you start getting this fallout, or this stuff that's stretching out. But like, it's not good. It's not good for the sellers. It's not good for the agent. It's not good for the company. It's just a lose-lose all the way around.
Yeah. And it sounds like, you are pricing it at somewhat of a discount for like a retail type thing when you put it on market. So now you have an expert realtor in the local area who's, putting the listing out there and probably preparing the listing the right way, and it's coming at a really competitive price.
Yes. So like, we've got the wind at our backs, basically.
Yeah. It's like sellers will be bitching about their realtor, like, this realtor can't sell the house. I'm like, lady, you have it 50K over ask and you won't drop the price. Like, what do you want the realtor to do?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they will blame you if it doesn't sell. If you break weak and give them unrealistic expectations, it's going to end up falling on you anyways. So you may as well just be stronger up front, hit them with the brutal truth. You know what I mean? And do it in a finessing way where they understand. And it's like you and them versus the data rather than you versus them, like trying to beat them up and prove them wrong.
Yeah.
It's like you're presenting this information and then now they feel comfortable of like, oh, I get it now, instead of like, oh, you proved me wrong.
Sure. And would you say, do you see a correlation between novations you're doing with occupied homes compared to vacant homes?
Honestly, a lot of them are occupied, and that kind of sucks. Like vacant is obviously
like even wholesale,
it's a
right?
layup.
Yeah, even wholesale. Obviously, like showings and viewings. When you're trying to wholesale a deal, you're running the same thing. Like they want this easy, convenient way. So typically that just means not a lot of people through the house, not a lot of buyers.
Yeah,
and you wholesale too, so you're familiar with that game. Mm-hmm. Do you see a big difference between how many times you got to get people in a house for a wholesale deal, let's say, that's occupied compared to a novation?
Yeah, so the wholesale deals, I think there are definitely less showings because normally the ones that we will put out as a wholesale, we have a buyer's list or we're using investor lift, and normally those deals are vacant. Now, it's very important to position it correctly with the seller because, one, when you're doing the novation, they already understand we're selling to a third-party buyer, and I always position it as when we call you to do showings, this is a great thing because that means they've passed our whole vetting process. You know, they've shown us proof of funds. They've seen all the professional pictures. We've spoken to them on the phone. They understand that we are, you know, pricing this at a discount and we are looking to move quick. And once they've gotten through all those steps, the last step is for them to get physical access. So when we call you for someone that is going to walk through, that means we're like footsteps away from the finish line. So that's a great thing.
Yeah.
And like then like you'll have the sellers like, hey, do you have any showings coming up? Like, how's everything going? Where, you know, a lot of times in wholesale, a lot of people teach kind of like a gray area of where you're presenting people as like your potential partners, contractors, you know what I mean? And then it makes them nervous when you have all these showings because it makes them feel more uncertain, right? Because they're like, well, why do they need to keep seeing this? I thought they're buying it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it gets kind of weird if it's not moving fast.
There's like a threshold, right? Like 3-4 showings maybe, but once you start getting past that sometimes, yeah, they start getting nervous. But with this, it's like they understand the process better. And we will run into people too that do give us pushback on showings. And if that's the case, what we'll try to do is we'll try to set it up for a weekend where we have a block of time. I'll send them like $50 or $100 to like go out and get lunch or get dinner.
Okay, so you'll even do like little things like that go a long way with sellers.
It does. Yeah. Like I've had sellers that were like very like difficult on the process and everything. I send them $100 and I swear, like it was like the nicest thing. Like, you know, they're like, I can't believe it. We went out to Outback and got steaks and I got a margarita and all this. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad. They're like, thank you so much. So those little gestures, you know, does go a long way. And it's helpful for us. Like we don't want the sellers in the house where we have all the buyers going through.
Oh, sure.
For sure.
Yeah. And I just think that's like a big part when you're looking at as well. You have a little ground to stand on, I feel like, compared to a wholesale deal where it's like, look, if you wanted like just me to walk it one time, a handshake deal, that was that cash offer that you said no to.
Yeah.
You know, like it's going to be a little more friction. It's not completely, if you wanted that one, that was that cash offer that I already presented to you. So I feel like you kind of have that ground to stand on compared to like a wholesale deal that's not moving.
Right.
That seller was under the impression of like, dude, I'm selling it to you at that discounted price. This is the lowest price.
Right.
You know, they didn't have a lower anchor with stronger terms almost with those wholesale deals. You know what I mean?
It's always good like to have that comparison of that. But yeah, and sometimes the sellers, like, it's not even something where like psychologically they're upset with it. It's like maybe their husband's disabled, maybe they have small babies, maybe they're handicapped. You know what I mean? Where it is difficult for them for whatever reason to have people in and out. But yes, then we just remind them of that, of like, hey, you know, a cash offer, you would have taken a $50K loss. Like, hey, I understand, you know, this isn't an ideal situation, but I think this is the best solution for you overall.
Go get some margaritas at Applebee's and, you know, let a few more people walk through your house. It's all good.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So then kind of walking through it. So like you said, vetting and hiring realtors, right? Mm-hmm. So you hire this all-star realtor. I'm assuming that they're vetting out the buyers the way a traditional realtor does, right? Mm-hmm. Who comes down to which offer they're going to select?
So the agents, they are essentially working for us. So we sign the agents through our authorization to sign listing docs and offers. It's an attorney-in-fact agreement that we sign with the seller. So this can be done just over DocuSign. It's not like a power of attorney where it needs to be notarized. So when we sign that, we can now sign with the listing agent. And then when they get offers coming in, they communicate that to us. And then we can either approve, counter, or reject the offer.
Okay, so you're making that decision. So even let's say, I don't know if it's ever happened this way, but you put it on the market, like first weekend, you get 10 different offers, let's just say, right? And you have one with like really strong terms, lower price. You have one with like a little higher price, but financing might not be as good. How are you deciding like which one to take? Because obviously one, you could get probably more money, but maybe running the risk of it not closing compared to like a lower priced offer that maybe has really good terms, hard EMD right away.
I just defer to the agent and pick their brain about it. because like, you know, I've never been a retail agent, and there's still things even from doing these deals that I'm learning new stuff all the time. There's a lot of different variables and moving parts and everything like that. So yeah, I'll have the agent, I'll just ask good questions, and I'll try to leverage their expertise and their knowledge. If I'm working on it with a partner too, you know, we'll brainstorm on that if it's like a JV partner. And we just try to pick what's going to be the best fit for the seller, what's going to be the highest certainty. So we will pick certainty over making a few extra bucks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So like we go for the certainty and the solid buyer, because like, yeah, the last thing you want is to have an offer, have it go through the inspection period, the seller's like all excited, and then you find out it was a wholesaler or some BS.
Or finance falls through like 3 weeks into the process, and now you're back at square one.
Exactly, because like starting it over, going from pending back to for sale is something you want to try to avoid, like at all costs.
Well, like we were saying, that kills your like 60 days. If you do that, you go under contract just 1 or 2 times, I mean, you're looking at 90, 100 days, easy.
For sure.
Yeah. Love that. I'm thinking about like the best leads. Like, do you go through old wholesaler leads and try to convert stuff, or are you mostly focused on the new, fresh wholesale leads? Like, where have you seen the majority of your deals coming from?
So my deals are all coming in fresh. You will find leads like going through the graveyard of like your CRM, like most certainly you will. Like, I mean, it's a fortunate problem to have, but like I'm at the point now too where I'm at like an abundance of leads, and I'm like frantically training people and bringing them on like my team. You know, I just hired 2 new people to help sort through my stuff, and I get JV leads and everything. So yes, like you can definitely use this, like this strategy. Like the way I lock it up will work for wholesale or for novation. And I sign the novation paperwork every time. And even if it's a house, like the only exception would be if there is no access, right, where I have to wholesale it, or if the seller is just completely opposed to the thought of putting it on the MLS, they had a bad experience, something like that, then I might do more of a traditional wholesale pitch. But 95% of them are all getting novation paperwork. They're getting the third-party expectation, cash offer takeaway, replace it with the concierge service. And yeah, about like a third to a quarter of them we're selling off market before it ever hits the MLS.
Okay.
Because if we can flip it quick and it looks like it's similar profit ranges, it's not like, okay, we'd make 60 on market or 20 wholesale. But if it's like, we might make 30 on market, but we could get 20 right now, yeah, we'll take the quick money, close that deal, onto the next one.
Yeah, and then like in that situation, you're really just wholesaling it, right? You're just assigning the contract, right?
Just
no realtors get involved or anything like that.
Exactly.
So if you could do that, make similar, why not?
Yeah, and if the seller's on like a really quick timeline, that would be the other.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess it's slightly different qualifying to be a perfect fit probably for novation compared to other distressed like wholesale situations where like they need money in the next 30 days.
Right.
Have you found certain types of situations, like when you look at all the different situations, there's probably like 5 or 10 different ones: inherited a property, money problems, divorce, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. Have you found a certain avatar of a seller that fits really well for novations?
So the ones that are the easiest to close are going to be the ones that are move-in ready. So the move-in ready are the easiest ones because the wholesale offers are all super low. So my competition has already set the low anchor for me. And then the thought of retail for them, normally if they're coming in my pipeline, they're, you know, it's either a PPC or a cold call. So the thought of going to retail is not their first choice because they would have already done that.
Sure.
So those are the easiest ones to convert because there's no competition for it, except for if they happen to be talking to someone else that knows novations, but then they probably would have already signed.
Yeah, and I guess if you're talking to the guy that's like, dude, I need money in 30 days, I'm getting foreclosed on this, that's when they accept the cash offer.
Yeah.
And that's probably where, like you were saying, 1 out of every, how many are wholesale instead of novation? You said like 1 out of 3?
3 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Some leads,
Yeah, but
it's
a
still
lot of
good
those
fit.
we could have sold as a novation still. It wasn't necessarily that it wouldn't work as a novation, but the wholesale was just the path of least resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can make a quick 30K on a nice assignment, buyer lined up, who doesn't want to do those deals?
Oh, for sure. Quick, easy, buyer we already know.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So after you get all the paperwork done, and now the realtor, you hire the realtor, what involvement are you in with between, I guess, like the realtor, the seller, like the whole process? Are you involved in a lot of that, or is the realtor pretty much taking care of everything?
I'm glad you brought this up. This is really important. You want all communication from the seller. You want to be the hub. You want to be anyone that needs anything to go through the seller has to go through you. Anything that the seller needs communicated also goes through you for a couple reasons. One, you want to be that buffer because the seller and the agent may not be as good of a communicator as you. That's one. And you don't want there to be any bad blood between the agent and the seller. Like, we want them completely separated where they're not really communicating at all. And that's the one side if things go the wrong way. But if the agent's really good and then they're talking to the seller, then it becomes this thing of, well, what are you doing, Rich? Like, what?
Yeah, yeah. What is this? What
do
this
I
guy
need
here
you for?
Yeah,
at
yeah.
that point.
Right.
But yes, it is good to stay in because, like, mentally too, for the seller to have one person that they talk to that solves all their problems, where they can communicate with you, and there's this congruency of you're the first person they talk to, you made all the promises, and then you deliver all the promises. It builds this goodwill and trust where if they're constantly talking to new team members and new people, they're like, well, who really has my best interest at heart? Like, you're traveling with them for the whole journey.
Yeah.
And then when things get squirrely, you have this whole history with them as well. Like when they do have like serious concerns or they're stressed out about finding their new place or all these different things that can go wrong, you're kind of that person. And like, don't underestimate, like when people are going through this process, like it's very scary for them, a lot of them,
Yeah.
right? And to have that person that has been true to their word the whole time, that they can ask the hard questions, they know they'll get the right answer, it means a lot to them. Because a lot of them are very nervous because like the people they've been talking to, they already know that there's something kind of off with them too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could just see you wouldn't want the seller and the realtor to just be yapping all the time, and then the realtor's like, "Oh man, yeah, we should be getting a 450 offer in no time," and then they're like, 450. Rich told me I get kind of 390. So I just feel like you want to try to avoid that yip yap conversation. Same way in a wholesale deal, you don't really want like your end buyer talking directly to the seller about the actual deal.
For sure. And, somewhat to protect our deal, but also for the seller, because this is the thing, like you want them as much out of the weeds and out of like the mechanics of what's going on. We just want to give them the result and let them know as we're hitting the main checkpoints.
Yeah.
So they don't feel involved.
Right. Because that's essentially why they chose to go your way. If all of a sudden now they're constant in communication with a realtor and stuff, that's probably is then they go, dude, why didn't I just hire
I didn't want to deal with a realtor. You know what I mean? So they're dealing with me, and I'm going to treat them much different than a realtor will. And I'll be that kind of buffer too, because the realtor, sometimes they'll get on my nerves. You know what I mean? I probably get on their nerves sometimes too. You know what I mean?
I tell sellers, I'm like, I'll shoot you straight. Like, if you want honesty, call me. If you want, best case scenario, go talk to a realtor sometimes. So
right.
I feel like you've already built that rapport now with them. It's not feeling like this like fancy suit realtor, we're doing all this stuff. So probably try to make it feel like it's a different experience, and try to have the seller feel like it's not maybe like it was when they listed their home 15 years ago last time around.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Night and day difference on the experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like that's really important for, these sellers. So when in your operation did it click to pivot away from wholesaling? Because you started wholesaling, right?
Right.
So when did it kind of click over to you that let me actually pitch Novation on most of these and kind of build my business up through those instead of the wholesale deals?
So I learned about Novation actually when I started working with Corey Geary.
Okay.
So I know he was on your podcast a while ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We talked about Novations about a year and a half ago.
Nice.
It has a lot of views, man. A lot of people I think want to go on YouTube and learn how to do Novations.
Oh, for sure. And that's where I learned the process from. As far as the paperwork and everything like that, the title company, all that stuff. Corey found out, I want to say in like a mastermind that he was in. Now, the pitch is something that I developed, right? Just from working with him, kind of tweaking it, throwing my sauce on it. And I kind of developed this whole process with the takeaway and the replacement offer. Because before that, a lot of people were just pitching the cash offer wholeheartedly. After they said no, then they'd come back and say, well, we can give you more money if you go this way. But, there's the issue is when you try to close them at that low number hard, it does somewhat break the goodwill of them.
Yeah.
And if they say yes to it, now you're back in that same scenario of doing a regular wholesale, and you can't pitch it on the MLS without like changing it, and if it's a house that doesn't work for a wholesale, like you've kind of painted yourself into a corner. So yeah, I learned while working with Corey Gear, and I worked with him for about 8 months. And he had his mastermind, the Novation Nation. My calls were like featured in there. So like people like had heard my voice, heard about me and everything. And when we parted ways, I had a bunch of people reach out to me and saying like, hey, I've heard your calls. Like, do you want to work some leads with me? That kind of led into some team training. And then that's where I really started just running with it and doing more JV deals, and eventually put out my course. And now I've trained like teams all over the country, and have, I think right now, like 140 course members in the last like 5-6 months, which isn't great, but I haven't really done any paid advertising on it yet.
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
man? That's a good little community.
We're growing every day, so I'm excited. And like when I see other people get Novation deals, like it pumps me up way more than my own deals, because like a lot of these people, they're like, man, my wholesale business has just plummeted since things have changed. And like, I'm wondering if I need to go and get another job or try a different industry. And like the Novations, like almost everyone I know that's doing major volume, they're doing like half or more of their deals on market.
Yeah. And I've heard Corey actually, I think on Instagram, talk a lot about like legalities, I guess. I don't know who he's talking about, but he makes it sound like some people are teaching.
I've seen that.
Teaching novations the wrong way.
You're going to go to prison.
And like, you're going to go to prison. And I've heard overall with novations, it's like, watch about the legalities and who's getting the proceeds. How would you kind of address those types of concerns?
So I'll preface this with I'm not a lawyer and seek, proper legal counsel. So I have a really good title company I work with. I kind of just trust them because they're the ones that are licensed and insured. And if anything were to go wrong, it's on, you know what I mean? Like, they're obviously much better experts than myself. So I use titleclearing.net, and they're in 48 states. They handle all that. I like the attorney in fact for a couple reasons. One, like I've done a ton of deals and there hasn't been any problems. With a power of attorney, it does have to be notarized, and it's my understanding that they're actually collecting the seller's proceeds and then distributing them to the sellers. I could see how there would be a point of friction where you're signing the final closing docs for the seller, you're collecting the full amount of money. Like that just,
that's a little
like if my grandma called me and said, hey, I met this great guy and he's going to take all the proceeds of my house and then like give them to me later. Like grandma, run, like call the FBI, like what's going on? Like, so I don't know, like the paperwork stuff. I just always defer to, the title company and, hire an attorney if you guys have questions about that to make sure.
I was talking to Jerry Norton about this, about structuring creative deals, and just even through what we've been talking about, like we've never structured some of these deals on the paperwork. And we talked to even like a great title escrow officer, Michael Rivera, in town.
Yeah.
And it really sounds like, people worry about paperwork and legalities and stuff. But if you have good escrow officers, good title company, they really are in charge of all that. And they handle all the paperwork. They keep you out of legal trouble. And they're doing all of that you don't have to even worry about that at all. And I think a lot of people, though, get caught up initially with that. I'm going to have to hire lawyers and get all these documents done. And
some people just, they get into that sort of thing. And I've even heard feedback, like other courses, like the main focus is the paperwork and the legality. Like, just remember, we're in a sales and marketing business. So like, you want to get your marketing beefed up and you want to get your sales and negotiation skills beefed up. Like the paperwork, yes, I would go with what's already working and go with a title company that understands it. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, the main thing that's going to get you in legal trouble is when you don't perform on deals, or if you do the sellers dirty in any way, whether it be real or perceived by them. That's what's going to get you in some potential hot water.
Yeah.
So I would say just handle the sellers, go above and beyond to make sure you are being ethical, even if it means sometimes you're losing out on money or you lose a deal if you need to. But you want to make sure that you're not doing anything unethical or, having the sellers get angry at you.
Yeah. and when it comes to then like protection for you, I know you mentioned it doesn't sound like you're doing a lot of novations with repairs.
Correct.
But I have heard people, novations, right? It's like houses that might need, some paint or this or that, or maybe needs a new boiler to get, be lendable again, or whatever it might be to the house. Have you had bad experiences, maybe paying out of pocket for repairs, and that's why you don't do repairs, or?
Well, knock on wood, fortunately, no. Like, we haven't had deals that, like, we've ever lost money on, like where the seller went AWOL and we put money into the house.
You were paying for all these Outback Steakhouse dinners, and then they were like, see you, Rich.
And they did us dirty. Fortunately, not yet. But when I worked with Corey, there was a few deals that he did where he did significant repairs. Like, he put a roof on a house, got a AC unit and stuff like that.
Seems dicey without the title in your name.
Well, it's, to each his own, but like the thing is, on those deals, we did all that. Like, they took like 4, 5, 6 months, and we ended up making like 30 grand after everything was done. But it's like, we put in like 5 times the amount of effort of a normal deal that we would make the same 30 grand on. So it's like the opportunity cost. Like, I could see it, like if there's like a massive opportunity where, hey, look, you put in 20, 30 of work, but just understand you're now a fix and flipper with creative finance. Like, you're not like a wholesaler doing a novation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for me, that's more than I would bite off and chew. But like someone like you, it probably makes sense because you're doing stuff like that all day anyways with hard money or your own cash,
Yeah. If I ever did something like that, it would have to be, I always want the deed if I'm going to make repairs. So maybe like a subtail where you take over the mortgage and then fix it, or, a short balloon seller finance deal, possibly, so I don't have to go get hard money and save me some costs there. But like in those situations, I'm still getting the deed before I'm spending a bunch of money on the house.
So the only issue would be if there was a VA or FHA buyer, because there's the seasoning period.
Yeah.
So if you were to do a novation, one thing you could do is you can either put a mechanics lien or like a notice of interest.
Okay.
And I certainly would sign some paperwork that, get an attorney to draft it up that says basically we're handling these repairs, and if the if the deal doesn't go to completion, you owe us for this, and have like everything outlined of like, this is the interest rate, has to be paid back at the, you know what I mean? Really get into it.
Yeah.
And that's not because like you want them to do that. It's more to scare them from knowing that they can't back out, knowing like, look, I'm putting up real money to do this. Like, this is not going to be something where you change your mind and you decide, oh no, I don't want to do it anymore, and hey, sorry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you're doing it, just make sure that you do protect yourself with the paperwork, and make sure you communicate that with the seller to avoid them feeling okay with backing out of it. Like, in part on them, look, you're really sticking your neck out. It was hard for me to get this approved. We have to have this rock solid paperwork just to protect us so we don't lose our shirt on this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are you doing these nationwide?
Nationwide.
Do you, and that title company you use, you said that they handle all 48 states, right?
48 states,
so
yeah.
They can kind of, if there's different states with different legalities, essentially, once again, just lean on them.
Exactly. Yeah, and in some states they have like local attorney partners, and some states like they're
I was wondering
they're handling it themselves.
In like attorney states, if just some attorneys might look at it and just be like, "What the hell is this?" and go to like the sellers and.
Yeah, like luckily, honestly, we haven't had that issue.
Yeah.
And all the attorneys that they work with are versed in this process.
Okay,
so that certainly helps. And I think at the end of the day too, like the lenders want to get deals done, their volume's down.
Yeah.
The attorneys want to get deals done. You know what I mean? So I've noticed there's been less scrutiny on that part. Now the lenders, there is more scrutiny on the repairs and other things, because they have a higher risk right now.
Right, totally. I even felt like it was like when the market was so hot, deals were just, it was, if you asked for like one little thing, you know, people were being so picky about deals getting across the finish line. But now it's like, hey, if you could get a deal across the finish line, everyone's kind of willing to be a little bit more flexible and lenient and not complain over the littlest of shit.
They're more cooperative. They like, everyone has a vested interest in this happening. So
yeah, no, I love that. So, I guess, does it work better? Have you seen in like certain type of markets, like a super hot market like Phoenix, or are you better off trying to rip novations in small town Iowa or something?
So the bigger markets, it is going to be easier to sell your deals because it's a bigger pool of buyers.
Yeah.
Now, it's probably going to be harder to get the deals under contract because there's more competition marketing wise. But yeah, like anywhere will work if you can negotiate a low enough price, unless it's just the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But even in small population areas, as long as there's some activity and you can get it at the right price and sell it at the right price, you can make it a win-win still.
Yeah. So to kind of summarize, you're handling the leads coming in the same way you would be if you're wholesaling deals, right? Looking for motivated, distressed sellers, want the easy button type sale.
Right.
Lead comes in, you pitch them low cash offer, anchor them with that, offer them the concierge service. And then essentially get all that paperwork over to title. You find badass realtors wherever the house is located, reach out to them. You guys kind of get on the same page because the realtors understand what you're doing too, right?
Yeah.
You know, so they're kind of informed about your process.
Exactly.
And then, you know, they're just doing their realtor thing essentially. And as long as sounds like getting around like 80%, you were saying, off of retail? Our exit price is 80% of retail, and then we negotiate at least 30 grand under that. Yeah. So typically, like if I'm underwriting wholesale deals in Phoenix right now, I want them at like 60 to 65% if I'm going to move them. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like with novations, you might be able to bump that up to like that 70 range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah, depending on the price point of the house, right? If it's a $300,000 house,
it's all things
to get to 30 grand, you'd be at about 70%.
Yeah, so typically beating out those wholesale prices, but you know, obviously, if you're a seller with a nice ass house, no motivation, you're not going to get those deals either. So they got to be, you know, in that situation where they're looking for convenience, willing to sell at a discount, but you're beating out a bunch of wholesalers, probably, right? Oh, for sure. For sure. It's very rare that I talk to a lead that's not talking to other people. Like, they're all talking to other people. Yeah. And they all want the highest price. So absolutely. Instead of contracting with a wholesaler at a high price who's going to just fall out of contract, it sounds like with you have a much better chance of actually finding them a buyer at that higher price. Oh, absolutely. Because there's people willing to pay. You know, yeah, so the retail buyers is perfect fit. Right. Makes a ton of sense. Obviously, I feel like we covered a lot. So that hour flew by, man. I definitely learned more about novations, and yeah, I think I'm definitely I'm seeing more of like the need and like the way you explained it all a lot more. I was kind of like, why wouldn't people just list it? But like you were saying with anything else, sometimes people just, you know, for a little better experience, a little bit more convenience, you know, that goes a long way for them, especially when you're delivering results and you're promising, you know, you're doing what you promised. Same with wholesaling. No one has problems with wholesalers if they actually delivered on what they said, right? Right. But it's the bad wholesalers that get us good wholesalers a bad rap. Exactly. So same thing could probably be said for novations. Absolutely. If people want to learn more about you, I know you have a community. What's the best way to reach out? Yeah, they can check me out on Instagram at Novation King. I post tons of calls, free content. I do have a course available too. It's Rainmaker Acquisitions. The link's in my bio. It's at novationking.com. But yeah, follow me on socials. I've got a Facebook group, private Facebook group for all the course members, and have some cool new things in the works too that I'll announce a little bit later once they come together. Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on today. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man.